New Zealand Tech Podcast, the voice of the tech community. Proudly supported by Umbrella Connect.
Hey folks, greetings and welcome along to the New Zealand Tech Podcast. We're at episode 504. I'm your host, Paul Spain, and today, very pleased to have Damon Kelly from Enlighten Designs on the show. How are you, Damon?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Great to have you here for the first time. Your first time in the podcast New Zealand studio. Maybe you could just give listeners an intro of where you fit into this big wide world of tech.
So I'm the founder and CEO of Enlighten Designs, and we started about 21 years ago, actually, out of a caravan out the back of my house. And we do Microsoft-based solutions in New Zealand across web and software development and other various scenarios. And we just won Microsoft Country Partner of the Year.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Well, I thought, it seemed to be a good excuse to get you on the show. So let's jump in. Now we're going to start with just some quick headlines, and then we'll delve into our discussion topics. First up, interesting to hear that New Zealand tech-enabled finance firm Laybuy did pretty well when they listed on the Australian Stock Exchange yesterday. Their share price rose around 50%, and and we've spoken about one or two of these firms on the show in the past, but they're in this buy now, pay later category, and seem to be doing pretty well. They launched in 2017 here in New Zealand, and they branched out into Australia and the UK as well. Now in China, we hear from their state media channels that China have launched and recovered a fairly secretive reusable spacecraft. From the bits and pieces I've heard, it sounds as though this may well be something sort of along the track of the space shuttle. Certainly that's a possibility, but there's a number of craft that are being developed in that particular manner in terms of space planes, including the New Zealand Dutch firm Dawn Aerospace. So apparently they were in orbit for a couple of days up until earlier on this week. Epic versus Apple. That fight seems to continue, and of course Epic did get kicked out of Apple's App Store. They went to court to try and stop it, and they were sort of partially successful, but not able to stop Apple kicking them out of their App Store. But they're now going back to court and trying to get their things such as Fortnite back into the App Store. And on the front of e-commerce, which of course has been doing very well for, I guess, people stuck in their homes not wanting to go out to stores, has worked well for them, and has worked well for companies like Amazon, who have seen their share prices go through the roof. But on the flip side, we've had these ongoing challenges with fake online reviews, and news in from the UK that Amazon have deleted 20,000 reviews from 7 out of their 10 top reviewers on Amazon UK. So sounds like possibly a lot of very untrustworthy reviews there on Amazon UK. Well, into our discussion topics. Microsoft Surface Duo, this foldable Android phone, arrives in the US on Friday. Damon, have you been following this? What are your thoughts on Microsoft getting back into phones but without Windows?
Yeah, I think the previous Microsoft phone operating system was actually pretty good, but they always had that challenge that they never had the app ecosystem. And I think the shift into going into Android means that now they really can have the apps if they can make really, really solid hardware devices. I think it'll be interesting because often when you look at Microsoft, some of their first or second generation hardware products and sometimes even software products haven't quite hit the mark, but they're just really smart at learning and iterating. And I think that deciding to come in with a foldable phone, which is in that new wave, I think it does set them up to have a chance of being really good. But, the other thing is, like, history has shown that they haven't been particularly successful in the mobile phone space. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I'm really curious about this. And look, I've been, usually with these new products, if they're not available in New Zealand, and I think they're really significant, and sometimes it's quite debatable whether they will be actually. And this one probably falls into that category. I try and get hands on, but there's no chance I'll be flying to the US this week, which was conveniently how I managed to get my hands on the first Apple Watch when it came out. And I haven't had too much luck with getting one of these shipped from the States, so I'm not quite sure we'll be getting hands on. But yeah, it is very curious, and Microsoft have done so many things in that mobile phone space, from the Nokia acquisition and varying other things that they did prior to that. Can they succeed? I guess it depends what success looks like for Microsoft too. How many of these things would they need to sell for it to make sense for their business? I'm not quite sure exactly what that looks like, and it's quite a high end phone in terms of the price point, $1,400 US, I think, for the base handset. So that market is not huge unless they're really locked in with a lot of carriers. I think they've got a partnership with AT&T in the US, which is one of the biggest players. So that may help them. The fact that it's Android though does mean that they don't have those app issues that they had with Windows Phone, which really was a fantastic operating system. It sort of sat somewhere between iOS and Android in terms of varying aspects, and we're only just starting to see now some of the aspects of Windows Phone start coming into iOS with the new iOS 14. So yeah, I think
it's interesting. There's a sweet spot where they might be able to get the form factor, which is slightly up from the Surface Pros, around where that phone fits into the mix. And I do think the innovation around a foldable screen around the various devices, like both the phone and the next device up, is going to be interesting. And I think they're squarely going to target that device at the business market. So it's where could those productivity apps and gains be? It'll be interesting, but challenging time with COVID to release hardware, I think, especially premium point hardware.
Yes, yeah. The online videos, it makes it look quite compelling. It is interesting when you look at what others are doing, that they're actually sitting behind in many regards technologically. So they're running sort of last year's chips in there. Base unit's got 128 gigs of storage. You can pay another $100 US and get 256, but you don't have expansion storage. You don't have wireless charging, any sort of waterproof element to it. So there's very much that sort of version 1 type product, but it does look as though the hardware is very, very nice. And of course you don't actually have a folding screen as such. You've got two different screens. Very, very slim for a phone that's got two screens. But yeah, I think there's a fair few unknowns. So yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing how they go with it. But I don't think it's a completely done deal either way. I'll sort of be very much on the fence. Now on to autonomous vehicles, something we do like to talk about on the show from time to time. I saw recently, and there's been a bit of coverage to do with autonomous boats, but I saw this was covered by the BBC about a 3-week Atlantic mission for an autonomous boat. And this to me, I think, is pretty cool. It was a 12-meter, they call an uncrewed surface vessel, 22 days at sea, mapping an area of the seafloor in the Atlantic. And this very much seems like, for so many scenarios, it seems like the future. Certainly, search and rescue type things. You would imagine they're going to be able to cover much more area, both in the air and on water, using autonomous vehicles. And then for certain types of things on water, where you maybe can't justify, or it doesn't make sense to have people. There are certain probably safety aspects and so on as well. But it does seem to be very, very much early days with this tech, doesn't it?
Oh yeah, it's I think the whole autonomous area is going to be so interesting because you can see the start of what's happening when you, for example, let's say you get into a Tesla and you have your first drive with autopilot running, and you're like, whoa, this car is like driving itself and automatically changing lanes, and you still have to watch out and pay attention because it's unfortunately not perfect, but it gives you that glimpse into the future. And then the other scenario why I think we're going to see, not just for search and rescue and some of these more exploratory edge cases, is if you go back to trucking. So the core scenario is the economics, if they can make logistics autonomous, are just massive. So you've got these huge races around driving autonomous shipping, and you can already see a lot with the mining vehicles as well. So I think the space is going to catch up a lot quicker than we realize, actually, which will be very, very interesting. It'll be interesting, I think, also will this be another scenario where COVID accelerates things? Because you're essentially getting to a scenario where you don't have to have people. It's it's going to be interesting.
Yeah, well, we spoke to David Ings, who's the founder and CEO, or co-founder and CEO at Rocos recently, and they talked about their platform. One of the things that their software, their robotic cloud, would work with is boats. So it's going to be very interesting, and I hope New Zealand companies can really find a role with these developments. Now, also on that front of autonomous technologies, I saw a headline about a Tesla driver in the US who was on autopilot and crashed into a police car. In fact, I think he actually ended up hitting two police vehicles in North Carolina. And the which doesn't sound like a good look for Tesla, but then it was also revealed that this guy was a medical doctor, and he was watching some video whilst in his car. So, a little reminder there, I suppose, is for those that are able to get their hands on this technology at the moment, because the technology works so well, the very large majority of the time, it is easy to get probably lulled into a false sense of security. Wisdom's still required at the moment, and keep your eye on the road if you've got a vehicle with some ability to do a level of autonomous navigation and driving.
Absolutely.
So it is going to be very interesting to see how quickly it does change. And we've been given so many people, and Elon Musk is a classic one in terms of giving dates of how close things are. You're never quite sure when we'll get to this sort of fully autonomous car world, and what is the exact technology that needs to be in a vehicle to do that. But he has been recently touting this whole new version of the autopilot software, which is apparently a complete rewrite. So and apparently only maybe 2 or 3 months away. So. And that apparently takes it from what today is mostly a sort of a 2-dimensional type view that their software takes to a 3-dimensional view, and so I'm hopeful that will be a reasonable leap forward. But I'm no longer placing any bets on where we're going to have fully autonomous vehicles. Certainly ones that can just drive all over New Zealand, and of course there will always be limits in terms of where this technology might be able to work.
Yeah, I think that the challenge with it is it's not a technology that's okay to work 99% of the time, right? You kind of need it working 100%, and then understanding all those edge cases is like so tricky, so tricky. We will get there, but yeah, that time horizon is going to be really hard to understand.
Yeah, well, you were talking about the sort of commercial applications, transportation and so on. I can see with some of the technology, and I've seen some of this in the US, where they've got these semi-autonomous trucks, which can go on the freeway, and on the freeway most of the time, they're totally okay without there being a driver. There is somebody sitting in the seat in the same way there's somebody sitting in the seat when maybe your Tesla getting from A to B, and with a requirement of that person to keep their eye on the road. But once that technology gets maybe not a whole lot further, you can imagine, even if the autonomous technology isn't completely there, that the idea of that sort of remote assist driver that can basically jump into the virtual seat with their VR headset on and just get that vehicle out of a tricky situation that maybe they've stopped in or something where the vehicle didn't know what to do. But yeah, realistically, I think the technology, all the dots need to join up so that the virtual driver has enough expertise and wherewithal to be able to handle the very, very, very large majority of cases. And these things ultimately come down to, is that autonomous driver safer than a person? And then how much safer than a person does it need to be before we're all feeling relaxed and comfortable with that approach? And yeah, I'm not quite sure how that lands. But I think there are plenty of roads in New Zealand right now where you probably would, for a large majority of your time on those roads, and particularly motorways, find that Tesla's technology and other people's technology actually can do a really good job in those scenarios. Yeah,
I think whether it be like autonomous technology or often when you look at artificial intelligence as well, I think that the combination or augmentation, so when you've got a human and then you're augmenting that human with a bit of driver assist or some machine vision or those style scenarios, that's certainly a place where I think we're seeing organizations are getting really good productivity gains at the moment.
Yep.
And it's interesting. I think there's always been this, like, if we kind of come to AI, this view that artificial intelligence is going to become our overlords and take over, and it's going to be Terminator all over again. But it's really at the moment, it's very, very powerful, but not by itself. You really need to kind of be augmenting in some way. And I think it comes back to the autonomous, right? Which is like, for there to be transportation completely independently, that means that you're kind of getting very close to 100%, or you've got an amazing solution for when you're hitting those cases which it can't counter. So
yeah. Which I guess, talking about these things is, maybe it makes sense to also delve a little bit into Neuralink, which, of course, Elon Musk and their team did their demo recently, and they're calling it Neuralink V2, and the demonstration was a pig with its brain basically hooked up to a computer and monitoring it. Now, in terms of what I saw of that, I'm not quite sure that that's the technology I'd want plugged into me right now. But I can see this is really going to evolve over the years ahead. It sounds like the technology they've got now, based on their experience with the pigs anyway, is that they can they can tap in, put this little coin-sized thing into the top of your skull. They can remove it and in theory not do any damage. But yeah, whether how that would work, I'm so many thoughts go through my mind, but certainly that idea of sort of augmenting and assisting makes a lot of sense, and particularly for those people who, from a medical perspective, have had a challenge or some sort of disability that they would love to be able to overcome. I can see there really being some genuine interest in this stuff. While most of us are probably pretty freaked out by it, I can imagine once they do say they're going to make it available publicly, there'll be a lot of people putting their hands up and say, "Yep, you can experiment on me."
I think this is such an interesting topic because if you look at humans, right, we've been augmenting ourselves right from like the dawn of time, like really early points where we've had like tools, right? That's essentially like a form of human augmentation. And then if you look at where we are now, like most people are augmented with a smartphone. So I actually remember earlier today, one of the guys in the office with me was like, "Hey Siri, can you give me the definition of this?" Right? So it's like talking to the phone in order to kind of augment intelligence at the same time. And I think through the last few months, what's been really surprising to me has been seeing like where virtual reality and mixed reality is going, because you can put on a VR headset now and you can suddenly warp yourself in with all of your friends around the world in a different location, and where you look, your essentially your mind thinks you're there. Now, if we look at the Neuralink scenario, it's interesting to think, okay, so like, some of the earlier versions of that are going to have to be hardwired in, which does not sound pleasant in the slightest. But actually, what if you kind of come up to first principles? What's the difference between that and a VR headset, right? So if it's like projecting it so that I can see it versus I'll put a headset on, it starts getting really interesting, and those lines I think are going to get really, really blurry. The thing I do think is interesting, I guess kind of going back on my comment from before, is that, Elon Musk's view of Neuralink was, he was like, we need to have Neuralink to augment humans because he's so afraid of artificial intelligence. So he's kind of going like, let's give ourselves some tools so that we can compete, otherwise we might be obsolete. So it's a great topic, Neuralink, and it's going to be really interesting to see what happens.
Yeah. I'm fascinated by it, and I think they did a good job with this. Their recent demo, just the downsizing of the technology. You're not wearing this big thing. It effectively can be invisible. I'm not sure. How many people want chunks taken out of their skull, and so on. But hey, we're early days with this stuff. But this would probably be, for me, I would not see this as sort of something I'm quite so keen to be an early adopter of. Put it that way.
No, I'm not.
Usually with technology, I'm like, a little bit of autopilot and a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and if they've tested that autonomous flying machine, I'll go up. They seem to have some good sort of safety around that stuff, but I don't know. This one I'll probably sit back a little bit on. Good luck to the pigs, and I hope they come out smarter, but not too smart with this tech. Now, in terms of things happening locally, contact tracing has been a bit of a challenge here, and I think everywhere around the world. In terms of, I heard somebody saying that in the US now they're not bothering so much with contact tracing, and it does seem to vary where you are, and the whole lot of different rules in place. I was speaking to a friend in Philippines recently, and he was just telling me how his whole family got infected, and it was like, wow. I mean, that's the closest I've come in terms of to anyone that's had that happen. He was saying, now they're getting them to wear not only the masks but the ones you'd seen in medical, the big sort of plastic,
the face
things.
shields.
Yeah, the face shields. So apparently that's mandatory. You can go prison or something in Philippines if you're not wearing both out and about, because they've it's been such a big problem there. And so we're when you compare our situation with Philippines, I mean, India sounds like they're going through a really, really tough time right now. We've been in a pretty good state, but of course we kind of want to keep the nirvana state as much as possible. So contact tracing tech seems to make sense for us to utilise it. And the numbers on terms of the New Zealand COVID Tracer app have really been going up. I probably would have been good if that could have happened earlier, but I don't think the app probably was that ready. But it seems to be in a better state now. I see its scores on the App Store, Apple's App Store, and the Google Play Store are edging up. I think they were sort of 2 point something when I first looked, and now they're at 3.2 on the App Store and 3.6 stars on Android out of 5. So that technology is getting better, much broader adoption. But then on the flip side, you've got the COVID card technology, which seemed like it might make sense to augment maybe alongside, where Sam Morgan's really called time and sounds like he's pretty fed up with the Ministry of Health there. I saw a quote from him saying that the project had been buried among people who are useless, deep inside ministries who just can't deliver this, which, look, I mean, I imagine, Sam's not used to working too much with government would be my call, which is probably the case with most sort of tech entrepreneurs. You expect to be able to move at pace, get something done, bring a change, and away you go. Government seems to be moving at a different pace on these things. What's your thoughts with how we're going on the tech front, or in terms of what we can see publicly as far as things like COVID Tracer app and the COVID card?
Yeah, great question. So,
because your company develops software, right? So I mean, I guess they could have come to you for the stuff,
or still could.
Yeah, that's it. We'll there see. You go. Yeah.
So when a country stops contact tracing, which has happened in some states in America, it's really when it's just totally out of control, right? So it's kind of there's no point contact tracing when so many people have it that you just there's too many nodes in order to calculate it. So I think in New Zealand, we're in like a really enviable position. I think we're ranked currently, the second safest country in the world in relation to COVID.
By some metrics. And I mean, it's really interesting without getting sort of political on that stuff. But I mean, I talk to friends in Australia and so on so often. And, you've got, at one end, you've got Victoria, where their numbers are, relatively sort of, through the roof. And then you look at most of the other states. Well, New South Wales didn't do so well either, but most of the other states, and I mean they've done better than New Zealand. So there seems to be something around Australia and New Zealand that it came a lot later. For whatever reason, things had spread in other parts of the world quicker. So I think that's part of it for us. We're sort of lucky to come later. And in most regards, it's been handled well. But
I think luck has definitely had a factor to do with that. I think no matter where you are in the world, right? Because you get a couple of super spreaders. If R is greater than 1, then you can get into an exponential curve pretty quickly in relation to the spread of COVID. I think when you look at things like COVID card and the Tracer app, they're all really good insurance policies, right? And I think the more of these style insurance policies that we have, the better that we are. And I think that we really want to be embracing technology and using that in a way of keeping ourselves safe. I think there's this other opportunity for all New Zealand businesses as well, which is our brand as a country, because of our response to COVID, whether it be luck or whether it be great governance, is super strong. And then that's something that we can really capitalize on. So I think that the sentiment of what Sam's encouraging is like great, right? Because if we can get New Zealand being like a world first in how we're doing contact tracing and really kind of showing that, then that will, one, keep us safe as a country, but it will actually have other countries looking to us for thought leadership, not in relation to how to deal with health and pandemics, but also technology. And I think that would be really, really good. I think some of the fundamentals always come back, which is, you've got to make sure that the user experience on all of these aspects is like really good and really easy and really seamless. And you've got to manage privacy well. So if you can do those two things, I think you're in a really, really good position. And I always love the Uber example, because just around, as you said, we build quite a lot of apps, but the technology in Uber was around for a very long time, right? We're talking about geolocation, we're talking about apps, we're talking about payments. But what they actually did was they stitched it all together and had a really easy user experience, like frictionless, right? You don't even pay when you leave the car. And by really making sure that user experience was incredible, it makes everything easy. So I think, and that's why with a lot of what we're doing, whether it be approaching websites or it be approaching mobile apps or applications, taking that customer experience, user experience first approach is really important. And I hope that what New Zealand does is that we look at that in relation to how we're responding to COVID and these contact tracing apps. Because I think if we do that well, and where it is getting 5 stars because it just works so easily and I don't need to do anything, I just walk in and it kind of triggers that I've been into the place, then it could be really, really good.
Yeah, I think that's really important. The other bit that probably sits alongside making it successful and getting that great reputation is how you actually encourage the uptake of it, because without uptake it doesn't achieve too much. And that is happening now, but of course it would have been much better if the momentum that was built in this kind of second wave had happened before we got to that. But we've got that advantage now, and that there is a reasonably good chunk of the population sort of taking advantage of it, not just having it installed but actually using it. So hopefully that keeps ticking up, and they get those usability pieces continually improving. And it seems like on the privacy front that they've handled it in a reasonably good way, but you never quite know. You can never be quite sure. So one thing I saw in the comments, someone was saying, look, why can't you have it that when you open the COVID Tracer app, that it just would come straight to the scan screen? And that was on a review I saw. I don't know, I saw it today, but it would have been probably in the last month or so. And that seems to be how the app's working now. When you fire it up, you're there ready to scan, so it just works. And I had a really embarrassing moment some weeks ago during the Auckland sort of second lockdown. I just installed the app on another device. So I usually carry iOS and an Android, put it on the Android, and I had gone through the steps to sign in, but they're like, you got to scan to go into the store, and I'm looking at it going, where's the scan option? And the person grabbed my phone and hit three different things to get me from the screen I was on to being able to scan.
Oh, no.
But I felt like a total noob at using technology. Like I need to go to a how to use, smartphone 101 course. But it was the nature of where the app was at that time, I suppose. Even though I was signed in, I opened it and it was like this clunky process to get to be able to scan.
Shows you how important usability is.
Yeah. Whereas, and then the previous time on my iPhone, I went into a store and it had signed me out, right? So it was like, screw that.
I think maybe even going all the way back to the Microsoft Duo, right? If the usability on that device is incredible, then it doesn't matter that the hardware in it is a little bit older. It'll be... Yeah,
that will lift it regardless, right? And I think they recognise that that underlying chip isn't the component that's going to matter to 99% of matter the most, shall we say. It does matter. It makes a difference in terms of being a device to help you with your productivity. If it's slower at doing stuff as everyone else's phones, that's going to be a problem. But it's not going to be that much further behind if the user experience is really good and you can be more productive.
I always love the story of the Nintendo Wii, right? So you have both Sony PlayStation and Microsoft Xbox. When they actually sell a console, they sell them at a loss, right? Because they need to make the money back on the games.
Yep.
But then you have the Nintendo Wii, which is this, the hardware is just not even comparable. It's like very, very basic. However, it was sold at a profit, but because the user experience and the way that it worked was so innovative and so different, they're making money from day one and they got huge market share. So it just shows that it's not always about how good is the latest and greatest technology. It's really like, what's the outcomes that it's going to cause? How usable is it? And I think coming back to the COVID tracing app, it's just, you have to, especially if you are asking an entire nation to do something, right? If you're asking an entire nation to do something, then that's got to be slick, right?
Yeah, and look, there are people that can't install an app, and I think there is room for that COVID card to sit on alongside because, from a user experience perspective, does it get that much easier than having something that you wear or put in your pocket? Well, yep, you could put a chip under somebody's skin or something, but I don't think there's too much enthusiasm for that. So, wearing a card is probably your good alternative for those things. And look, I think of my father who in his day was a computer programmer, and but these days his use of technology, I don't think that he's actually although he's got an Android phone, I'm not sure that he actually has a login for Google Play and so on. So can he install the app? Don't know, maybe not. So yeah. Now, one last thing that I just want to talk about before we dive in, and keen to hear a little bit about Enlighten Designs, is this watch I've been wearing the last couple of weeks, and I thought I wasn't allowed to talk about it. And then I checked in with the manufacturer today and said, what was the embargo? I hadn't seen any online coverage of it when they sent it to me. I googled it. I don't know. I have had it for 2 or 3 weeks, and they said, no, you're allowed to talk about it. It launches this week in New Zealand, and it's called the Huawei Watch Fit. And you were looking across at it before we started, and we had a little bit of a chat before we started recording, and you were trying to get your head around what it was. What does it remind you of?
Oh, it looks like an Apple Watch, but kind of one that's a bit more skinny.
Yeah, it was quite a surprise to me because I knew nothing about it when they sent it. There was nothing online that this was coming, not that I saw anyway. And I opened it up and I thought, hold on, that looks very, very Apple-esque in terms of just the curves and the shape. And I've worn before one of the Fitbit devices where people have mistaken it for an Apple Watch because it's a similar sort of squarish type screen and so on. But when you look at it closely, clearly nothing like an Apple Watch. But yeah, this is sort of rectangular. It's a portrait style touchscreen. You've got your sensor on the rear for getting your pulse and so on, and looks like a pretty slick device. It's coming in at $229, so it's a much more accessible price point than the Apple Watch. And I think this is the sort of thing that will help them to maybe get a little bit of market share with this. Now, I'm not sure what challenges Huawei have in terms of chips and exactly how that will look for them going forward, because they do have some challenges. But yeah, it's probably the standout thing for me is you've got this nice screen, but having that color screen and so on doesn't mean that it's got a short battery life. So you think of the Fitbits where you can get I don't know, I think probably about five days would probably be typical of the different Fitbit devices that I've tried. Certainly, 3 or 4, no problem at all. I hear that Huawei tout this as 10 days. My experience, and there's a couple of different settings, and one of them will halve the battery life, which is if you want a screen on 24/7. My experience is probably 3 to 6 days. That's
good.
Which is like, charge it, once or twice a week sort of thing. So, it's a little bit easier. It does the sleep tracking. I haven't delved, massively into all of those bits and pieces, but it's got a fair bit of a fair few options in terms of what you see on the screen. So a little bit like the complications on the Apple Watch. But at a much more accessible price point. The other device that will look actually even more like an Apple Watch is the new smartwatch from Oppo. And I got contacted about that one at a similar time, but for whatever reason it hasn't arrived yet. So that's just launched into the market. I think their ones are at a more Apple-esque type price, but they're in the market right now as well. So that will be interesting to look at. But apparently they're sort of complete spitting image of the Apple Watch. I'm not sure on the software side how that looks, so we'll wait and see.
Interesting.
So Damon, I'm keen to hear a little bit about Enlighten Designs. You've just won the Microsoft Partner of the Year award, which is a recognition of outstanding work that you've done over the last year. But where did you come from? You talked about a caravan 21 or so years ago.
Oh yeah. So originally, Enlighten started in Hamilton, and I was at Waikato University. And I was doing a double major in psychology and cognitive science, and I was playing a computer game. I think it was Quake, and I'd been connecting with through the internet with all of these people around the world, and we'd created this kind of big online community site. And I had no money; I was like a broke student. So I approached the internet service provider, and I said, "Hey, your website sucks. I'll tell you what, I'll do you a new one if you give me free hosting for this community site." They turned around and said, sure. I stayed up that night. I drank a lot of something from way back in the day called Jolt Cola and also Mountain Dew.
Yeah.
And gave them a website the next day after not much sleep. And they were like, hey, this is really good. We've got some other clients which would be interested. Can we start sending you people to build websites? And I was like, sure. So started building a collection of websites for their clients, and then I decided not to go back to university because I think I was going to do clinical psychology as my postgrad. And then, friends ended up coming and saying, we want to work with you, and that's where Enlighten was born. And I think the cool thing was it's like 21 years later when we just won Microsoft Country Partner of the Year for New Zealand, which is really exciting. But I want to just maybe talk about a couple of our clients really quickly, because I thought that was really interesting, because I think the stories are really neat, and I think they really fit the audience of your podcast. So there are a few different clients that we, which is why we won, but one of them in particular is really, really interesting. And Well Networks in the Waikato created a power retailer called Our Power. And they got us to develop essentially a completely automated power retailer. And I think it has 3 total staff that run this entire power retailer. But the reason why they did it was really, really cool. They looked and they went, there's all of these people that are suffering from energy hardship. And energy hardship is when you spend more than 10% of your disposable income on power. And they said, can we use technology to just remove people out of a power retailer so that we can have, offer just super cheap power? So that will then support all of these people in the community, which we developed and is now live, and people can kind of sign up. And it's been incredible. And they've I think last count, they were well overselling $1 million of saving $1 million of power savings for people. So that's pretty cool. And then they redid the same thing in Ragland, and they're looking at taking that concept and scaling it forward. So I thought it was just this really nice scenario of where technology is being used for good and where organizations are kind of being like, how can we embrace this to make a difference? And then the other one, another client which I want to talk about a little bit was Sustainable Coastlines. So these are the guys that organize what are called citizen scientists, so normal people from the community, to go and do beach cleanups and across like all of our beaches, and then categorize all of that rubbish so that information can go to government. And we did some really cool stuff around visualization and artificial intelligence and data recording in for that. But I thought what was really neat around our win this year was the fact that not only were we acknowledged for the really cool commercial work that we've been done, but actually how technology had been used to support communities and help places around the world. So I thought that was really neat. So
yeah, that's cool. I mean, I'm particularly interested how do we use technology as a country to do good things, and whether it's to address some of our challenges that we have, and differences where people are stuck, whether it's without home, employment, or what have you, and through to how we can really lift our economy and do better on a global stage. So it's always good coming across Kiwi firms that are doing smart, innovative things with technology. So yeah, that's cool. And where to from here? Like what is your the general type of opportunity that you tend to look for that's a good fit for your team? 'Cause it seems like you've come a long way from when you were staying up all night to build a website, but you still do websites, right?
Yeah, no, still do websites. I think what happened when COVID hit was we paused and went, okay, what are the challenges that our clients are going to face, and what are the challenges that New Zealand's going to face as a whole? And how can we create offerings which will be specific towards supporting that? So in the very early days of COVID, we came out with a bunch of crisis communication solutions that organizations could use to like talk to their stakeholders or chat internally with their employees. And then moving forward, it's been, and this is like not just happened in New Zealand, it's happening globally, is that the pace of digital transformation has kind of gone through the roof, right? So, I think you mentioned e-commerce before, like digital selling, whether that be through websites, through e-commerce systems. It's like you can't really be confident in your business if it's only brick and mortar now, and you only have like a physical retail presence. You really need to think, how can I make sure that I can get things delivered to my customers? And then the other piece which has been really interesting is that most of the world's in lockdown. But people still need to eat, and, people have like employees and families to look after. So the other big rise that we've seen is that organizations are no longer just looking in their backyard like they used to, right? Because normally if you were looking at selling something to someone or providing solutions, you'd kind of be like, okay, I'm in Auckland, so I'm going to do that to everyone that's around in Auckland. I'm going to walk and I'm going to go and see them. But now what we're seeing is that people are going, actually, I'm really good at this. No one can go and physically see people like they can in a large amount of places in the world. So that because now everything's being done via video conference and being done online or via remote work, the world's now your oyster, right? So I think New Zealand's got this interesting point, which is we've got all of these international companies that can be coming into New Zealand, that we need to realize that our competition has increased for products and services.
Absolutely.
But also at the same time, we've got the ability to go back out to the world. Yeah. And I think it's a super exciting time. And then New Zealand's got this other advantage at the moment, which is our brand is so strong because of our COVID response. So I think we've got this great opportunity to really think, how can we be a bit entrepreneurial? How can we use technology and make a really good difference, not only for our communities, but potentially even from like a global perspective as well?
Yeah, that's great. And yeah, we are in this fascinating time on that digital transformation front, where so much has happened so quickly, and we're told we've squeezed in 5 years worth of digital transformation into just a few months. And I think that it's really important now that there's that momentum there, that businesses shouldn't be pulling back and going, okay, we did what we had to do. We've got our online store running, or we've got everybody working from home well. It makes sense to actually keep that stuff going. And, to me, it shows that things can be done very, very quickly. And every organisation should be looking at, well, what's next? What can we be doing that other people are doing, or that hasn't been done before, but, we can see the opportunity. And, I think that's part of how we make New Zealand more competitive as well, right? We keep that Kiwi ingenuity, that sort of thinking going, while we're in this place where we can actually, meet face to face and be, reasonably, safe. And that is different to certainly, big parts of the world. And, we hear this from people at Microsoft and Google and Amazon and others, where they're saying, hey, we've been told we can, work from home for another 6 months, 9 months, and so on. Whereas, actually, we can get together. So we should take advantage of what comes out of that. Not that you necessarily need to be, getting together in person to be able to innovate and come up with new things. But I definitely think we should take advantage of that momentum anyway.
Oh, I totally agree. And I think the other piece is that because of COVID, innovation is going so much faster. And we had this conversation before that you had one of the biggest kind of social network for kind of clubs and DJing in the world, which is pretty cool. And this weekend, Microsoft acquired a while ago a virtual reality platform called AltSpace. And one of the things that's happening in AltSpace at the moment is that you've got all of these people, whether they be kind of festivals or concerts or stand-up comedy, there are all of these people from around the world connecting together either in 2D or in virtual reality in these 3D worlds. And when you're in AltSpace, you've got this kind of cartoon style avatar. And one of the things that I saw over the weekend, which was really interesting, is they had basically, and this technology, this was like a world first, so it had just come out. So because they were racing so quickly to try and make these incredible environments, you had all of these people. I think there were just under 1,000 people at what was Diplo, which is like a DJ event. And you had this DJ who was wearing a Microsoft HoloLens, so he was using augmented reality to be able to see all these little virtual avatars while he was mixing DJ decks. Well, you had all of these other people in this virtual reality world, which were looking at little cartoon avatars of each other, but then looking up and seeing a hologram of Diplo, which was like inside their virtual reality world playing. And this was people from all over the world. And this technology literally was released the day before.
Wow.
And that's just how fast that things are starting to move. And if you take that in this one scenario, you kind of come back to going, yes, COVID's meant that businesses need to be up to date with technology at the moment. And I think we've seen a huge amount of digital transformation, but it's also just sped everything up. And I think it's really important at the moment to be looking around and going like, whoa, because everything's suddenly accelerated again. And to be honest, technology was accelerating before COVID, but this is just taking it up another couple of gears. What's going to happen next? So I think what you were saying is like just spot on. Businesses and organizations just need to be looking to the horizon at the moment and being like, how can I capitalize this for opportunities, and where might the threats be coming from?
Yeah. Oh, well, great to have you on the show, Damon. Now, huge thank you to our show partners that make the New Zealand Tech Podcast possible. Sumo Logic, Vodafone, Spark, Vocus, HP, Samsung, Gorilla Technology, and of course our headline partner, Umbrella Connect. So a huge thank you to those organisations, both for supporting the New Zealand Tech Podcast, but also for getting behind the technology and innovation ecosystems here in New Zealand, which is just fantastic. Well, thanks everybody for listening in. Thank you, Damon. Now, where do people track you down online?
Just go to www.enlighten.co.nz.
Excellent. And, of course, people can track NZ Tech Podcast down across all the social networks. We're on LinkedIn now. We're often streaming on YouTube with live streams of the show in video form, also Facebook and Twitter. All right, thanks everyone. Catch you next week. See ya.
New Zealand's Tech Podcast, the voice of the tech community, proudly supported by Umbrella Connect.